Hey guys, welcome back to Proper Chuffed. My name's Hilton and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Today is my birthday. Yes, I have a very active social life. I really need to get out. But I figured what better day to have a video than on my birthday. I hope you guys enjoy it and I hope it's as much of a gift to you as I guess editing is a gift to me. I don't know. Still, if you enjoy this content, please do consider subscribing. There would be no better birthday gift, or even better, drop a like. That would be really great. Made a bit of progress on Dunromin, and that's what this video is about. But before we get to that, I've got something very special I want to share with you guys. One of my channel members, or Westies as I call them, Bill, has sent me a locomotive. And it's basically a perfect match for Dunromin. So first things first, we're gonna open up our gift from Bill and take a look at it. And then we'll get into some Highland ballasting, the recipes I use to create my own ballast, how I ballast, and we'll take a look at the rest of the layout. So do strap in, make yourself a cup of tea or a dram of whiskey, I won't judge, and let's get straight into it. So about a month ago, I got an email from Bill all the way in Scotland, and he reached out to me and said that he really appreciated my content, and that was incredibly touching. The way he worded it all was very, very kind. And he said, could I have your address? I have something I'd like to send you. And I sort of was a little bit taken aback, very humbled. First of all, thank you, Bill. Very kind words. But I gave Bill my address and I just said, please just make sure it's nothing, crazy or anything like that. He was incredibly thoughtful and asked me about shipping to South Africa, as the South African post office is in absolute shambles at this point, and he managed to get it sent off with DPD, and it arrived just a couple days before my birthday, which is today. I don't know how I feel about this sort of thing because it's a level of generosity that I'm not exactly quite used to. Regardless, I'm eternally grateful, and I'm very excited to open this up. So let's take a look. All right, so I've obviously just hid all of Bill's information there as I don't want anyone seeing that, but we are going to pop this open. Now, I have absolutely no clue what Bill has sent me, which is rather exciting. This is like a birthday gift all in itself. In fact, there were no model trains for my birthday this year, and that's okay because Annie got me a really, really cool record player, something I've always wanted. Looking forward to building up an entirely new collection of something else, I guess. Oh boy, I can see a familiar color. Oh, what is this? Oh my goodness. Guys. Oh my goodness. Wow. This is the Ruston I have always wanted. This is, wow. This is really, really kind. Jeepers. And it's in absolutely mint condition. Oh my gosh, this is so generous. Wow. I have a Hornby Ruston. It's I think a Grant Rail sort of yellow one. And I think they're amazing. I think this is one of Hornby's best ever products. But this particular Queen Anne is the one I've always kind of had my eye on, simply because it's associated with Scotland and distilleries and whiskey. So this is, wow, this is really special, Bill. Thank you, my friend. This is very, very generous, very generous. Oh wow, look at that. That is a beautiful livery. My gosh, I'm actually quite touched. That's incredibly kind. Oh, this must be a shipment thing. Oh wow, okay. He's written a letter here, which is very nice. I'm going to cover up his address at the top there. I think I'll read it and I'll chat to Bill before I edit and send this out, just to see if he's happy if I read this. He says, "Hi Hilt, hope you and Annie are well and enjoying life." Thank you, Bill. Yes, we are, very much so, especially right now. Please find enclosed the Wii gift we discussed. I got this a good few years ago secondhand from a trader at the Perth Model Railway Show and intended to use it on a distillery scene on the layout I had at the time. Sadly, it never came to pass and it has been lying in the cupboard ever since. When I saw the distillery scene on your layout, I thought this may be of use to you. I hope you like it and can use it, but please don't feel obligated in any way. Use it or not, I leave that up to you. Many thanks again for all you do, and I look forward to future updates on Dunromin. Kind regards, Bill. Wow, Bill, thank you. It will be used, I can assure you of that, my friend. It's absolutely stunning. I'm very, very taken aback by this. This is such a kind gesture. Actually had a bit of an argument with Bill as it was coming through customs, because he insisted on paying for the customs duties, and I said to him, please, you've already done enough for sending me something like this. Granted, I didn't know exactly what it was, but the fact that he was just sending something from the UK was a huge deal. So there's a decoder in here too, and some whiskey barrels. Can you believe it? I cannot believe that. He's included a little Trainomatic decoder for the Ruston. And look at this. Whiskey barrels and pallets. Isn't that brilliant? Gosh. Oh my goodness, those are so cool. I have a couple whiskey barrels of my own, but they're slightly oversized. I mean, they're more like ridiculously big barrels, and they're not painted. These are stunning little things. These look painted, like hand painted, but very clean. Wow. And the little pallets to put them on, that's amazing. Oh, I'm over the moon. It's so thoughtful. Pop those back in the packet there. Oh man, jeepers, Bill. You really went all out, my friend. Guys, look at that. That is so stunning. You know, I think these Rustons are one of, I think I said it earlier, but these really are one of Hornby's best products. That is absolutely spectacular. You certainly outdone yourself, my friend. This is a beautiful, beautiful little model, and I am very happy and will be running it proudly on my layout. Jeepers. The inclusion of decoder too, as he knows that I'm DCC, that's just very, very thoughtful, very thoughtful. Thank you, Bill. That's really, really special. I don't think anyone's ever done something so kind and generous in my time on YouTube. That is really, it's really next level. Thank you so much, Bill. I really, really appreciate that. That is a very, very kind gesture. This is Queen Anne, and she will be proudly running on Dunromin. Right, so here we are on track with our delightful little Queen Anne, and I've put some whiskey barrels that Bill provided, as well as a couple of the little pallets on the small little wagon behind it. This actually serves as an additional pair of pickups for the small 48 Ruston. So overall, I think the connection should be pretty good, but let's see how she performs. I'm going to put her under power, just very slow speed. I've tried to clean the track as much as possible, and of course the wheels, just to be safe. So let's see how she does. Right, so I'm just going to put the power on slightly. You can hear the motor whirring. Oh, she's very steady. Very slow. Wow. Okay, that's impressive. I did not expect that kind of motor control. That is incredibly fine. Jeepers, that is actually kind of bonkers to have that kind of control. And backwards, the same control, the same very fine motor movements, slight little bit of cogging every now and then, but I suspect that's a track connection thing, not so much the motor itself. Very steady. You can see those little barrels are holding on strong. There's no sudden or jarring movements. That is absolutely bloody delightful. Wow, that's so cool. I think she's going to be perfect for the Dunromin distillery, which is yet to be named. Well, in the background, I've sort of called it Dunromin Distillery. I have yet to give it a proper name. So I'd like to open up the floor to you guys to drop some suggestions for a whiskey distillery name for Dunromin. I could just go with Dunromin Distillery, but I kind of wanted to have a slightly different name. I'm going to build a whole identity and brand behind that whiskey once I get to that point. So I'll create a logo and everything, but the name will come from you guys. So let me know what you think we should call the distillery, and I will choose the best one in a couple of episodes' time, once I've decided which one is the most apt. As some of you may know, I previously opened up the name of the layout to you guys, and it was chosen by Derek L, who decided on Dunromin. So we may as well decide on the whiskey distillery name with your guys' help as well. So please let me know. There's a little bit of polystyrene on the front, I realized. Don't worry, that is going to come off. I just need to clean it off correctly. But let's do a little bit of running with this Rustin in the meantime, and we'll get straight to the rest of the layout updates. As you can see, we've got some ballast on the ground, so I'll be talking all about that in just a moment after we've run in Queen Anne. Oh man, look at that, it is so brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill, that is awesome. In the past 2 weeks since my last update video, I've made some serious progress on Dunromin. So today I just want to walk you through everything that's happened and to see where we're going. But in this video, we're going to laser focus on track ballasting and color specifically. And I'll show you how I achieved my West Highland line colors, which I think are pretty good. I just want to quickly touch on track color, or rather sleeper color. I use a mix of various aerosol spray paints, all of them acrylic. I look at exactly what the sleepers look like in Scotland, which is usually quite an oxide red, but there are often very dark browns and sometimes some even lighter sleepers along the way. Essentially what I do is just go a little bit crazy and kind of mix it up, create some variation and differentiations. The important thing is to not have uniformity with something like this. In the real world, as much as possible, nothing really is the same. So when it comes to colors and color matching, I don't give it one base coat. I'll give it a variation of different colors in order to create something a little bit more broken up and out of the ordinary. And hopefully when all is said and done, that looks more accurate than your standard sort of run-of-the-mill single can of paint. One of the things that has really plagued me throughout this entire experience, even with my first layout, was the ballast color. My first attempt at making Scottish ballast, which has a very sort of distinct iron oxide red color. It's quite brown, quite black, and quite red. I really didn't get this right at all. I used a gray ballast initially and then sort of spray painted it, and it looked okay, but it was a little bit too red in my opinion. Scottish ballast is a very unique sort of color. And in my last video update, I asked you guys if you could potentially recommend a certain type of ballast. Now, in my previous update video, somebody did actually suggest an N-gauge ballast for me. But when I looked into it, unfortunately, it was going to cost me a lot of money to bring in a tub of ballast of that grade from the UK to South Africa, purely based on weight. So I decided I needed another solution. Now, I had been looking at Woodland Scenic's buff ballast for quite some time, and I actually ordered some, and to be honest with you, this is wildly off from what I needed. This is more like a sand ballast more than anything else. Quite a few photos that I saw of this stuff looked quite dark, but when it arrived, I was very disappointed to see just how sandy this looked. So this is out. So the next step was, how do I at least make my own ballast? So I put my head together with my friend Rinke, and we came up with a solution to create our own ballast. So I'm going to show you how I mix my own Scottish ballast and the ratio that I use to achieve it. So hopefully if you're modeling Scottish and you think that this is correct, which I think it largely is. I think we've got it quite spot on here actually. Maybe you can use this to create your own Scottish ballast too if you're unable to get some. And then I think we should do a little bit of ballasting, because as you can see I've already started, but I'll show you my method. It's not the quickest, but it certainly achieves good results, in my opinion. Right, so to create this ballast, you're going to need some fine cinders, or a small dark black sort of stone, a dark brownish color, also quite fine, a medium brown, and some very fine red oxide. I'm going to put the ratio of what I use up on the screen so that you can achieve the same result. So we're going to start with the medium dark brown, and I'm going to scoop 2.5 teaspoons of the medium brown. We're going to move on to the dark brown, and we're going to go with 1 scoop of that. We're going to go with 1/2 teaspoon of the red oxide, and then we're going to go with 1/2 teaspoon of the black. Now all we need to do is mix this all together. And as you can see, we've got somewhat of a correct color. In fact, I think it's pretty damn close to the correct color. Based on numerous photographs and videos that I looked at, this sort of mix here of brown, mostly brown, with just a little bit of a hint of red and black looks great on the eye and really does Highland Ballast justice, in my humble opinion. You guys let me know what you think, but I'm pretty happy with this. And as you can see, I've already committed to it, so there's no going back now. Okay, so here is the piece of track that we are going to ballast today, just to show you my methodology behind it. I use a tub of glue and water mixed with a little bit of dishwashing soap, and I use this as a ratio of about 1 thumb thick full of glue and 2 of water. And then I mix it all together with just a spot of dishwashing soap, and that seems to do the job. Now, this is not as quick as, say, speed ballasting would be. A lot of people have some really rapid methods of speed ballasting. I've tried using that ballasting tool. I found that absolutely frustrating to use, and I don't enjoy it at all. This is my method, and it's certainly not the go-to one, but I find that it gives me the best results. Everyone has something that works differently for them, but perhaps this might be of use to you. So I'm going to start with the center of the track. I'm going to take a teaspoonful of my ballast, and I'm just going to drop it in here, in between the sleepers. Then I have 2 very important brushes that I use for this process. The first is a very thick square brush, and the other is a very thin square brush. This is actually used for weathering, but it works perfectly on the ballast. Now, what I'm going to do is just lightly brush my way along the sleepers here. Doesn't matter if it pushes out and onto the track below. We're essentially just filling up the sleepers in between, and because it's flat, it's not digging in between the sleepers and pulling that ballast out. And you can just lightly brush over this to make sure that you clear the sleepers as much as possible. We don't want, ballast sitting on top of the sleepers. at the end of the day, because ballast isn't usually on top of sleepers, it's between them. So I'm just going to brush it finely just to make sure that I've got them all spaced out, and you'll see that it goes a lot further than you might think it would, just because it's not taking up all that space. So we got a little bit of excess on the sides here, and I'm just brushing that against the side of the cork to make sure that it doesn't run away too far. So this is phase one, because I don't actually do both at the same time. I don't do the sides of the sleepers. I first lock down my middle section. So I use a pipette. It's probably the best thing I've found. I've actually in the past used like a squeezy bottle, a vape bottle, all sorts of different things. But I find that the pipette gives me the finest control of the lot. Right, so super simple. I'm going to use the pipette and just run it along the side of the actual railway track and just let it soak in naturally into the stones between the sleepers. Nothing crazy, I'm not running it too fast. I don't want to bounce the stones up, but I'm going to do the same on the other side. Inside the sleepers, inside the track I should say rather. And honestly, the one thing I've learned in my time with ballasting is that you can never have enough of your mix. Rather absolutely saturate it than don't wet it enough. There's nothing more frustrating than dealing with tiny stones that are kicking up over time. So rather far oversaturate the whole thing than undersaturate it. Okay, so with that glued down on the middle of the track at this point, we can start working on the sides. Now, what helps by having that glue in the middle is that you can see it's already seeped out slightly onto the sides of the sleepers. And that will help us when we start ballasting the sides. Now, I take a fairly thick teaspoonful, but I essentially just run the lip of the spoon along the cork. And I lay it on quite thick. And what we can do is then just make sure that we've got a little bit more just on areas where it looks a little empty. Okay, this is where my brush comes in again. What I'm going to do first and foremost is brush back away from the edges of the sleepers so that we clean up the sleepers. We don't want the sidebars of the sleepers buried under any ballast. Okay, and now I know it looks a little messy. We're going to use the flat part of the brush here just to push the stones back up against the sides. This way we create a sort of decline from the track height down to ground level. That looks natural and gives you that lovely shoulder that we're so used to seeing on railways. Now I'm going to use my little flat brush and just brush back all the stones that might still be on the top level of the sleepers. We pipette again, and this is going to look a little odd, I realize. Actually, let me just brush some stones back against here. Let's try and create a bit more of a solid line. Okay, this is going to be a bit odd. You're going to wonder what I'm doing, because I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm going to run glue along the board here at the base of the ballast. And what this is going to do is essentially soak into the ballast from the bottom up. Often when you're ballasting, if you put down a big glob, unless you use IPA, it kind of condenses into a ball of stone and it looks very unnatural and you need to fix it. But I find that if you saturate the ballast from the bottom, it creates a firmer base layer and prevents a buildup like that bowl of gravel that you usually get. Now, I work my way from the top down, just saturating the sides of the rails and letting the glue naturally flow downwards to meet that soggy glue at the bottom. And we can just keep working backwards and forwards this way from the top to the bottom until we have a completely saturated shoulder of ballast. And now that it's mostly saturated, any dry areas we can just dab with the glue and it's just going to flow without creating any damage to our ballast. I think the trick really is just oversaturate rather than under. And it looks like ridiculous right now, but I guarantee you when it dries, it'll be rock solid. You won't have any stones lifting whatsoever. Everything's going to be super, super locked in. And that's how I ballast. It takes a bit of time. It's not as quick as some methods that I've seen, but it works for me. So we are back at the tunnel portals. As you can see, I've ballasted this whole area. I'm not ballasting just this side of the track yet, just because I need to put my station in first, and then I'll finish ballasting once the station's in position. But I just want to talk about the tunnel portals and tunnels in general. A couple of people mentioned in my last update video that, oh, there's a bug. A couple of people mentioned in my last video that these tunnels are very uncommon for the West Highlands, and I would not disagree with you, but certainly challenge you, because there are a number of tunnels and overpasses and all sorts of weird things that happen in the West Highlands that I've seen anyways. Needs must in this situation. You have to make a couple compromises when you're building a model railway, I think. One of the things that I really wanted was obviously to have a second line where I could run a separate train. And because I'm trying to focus on having a single West Highland line, I had to make a couple of exceptions. And the one that I'm referring to is the reverse loop here through this tunnel. Obviously we've got that tunnel up there on the hill and another one on the other side. So this essentially mirrors itself on both sides of the layout. But I had to do it because there was no other way to hide the reverse loop inside the mountain, essentially. So I had to make a bit of a compromise. If you feel like that's not very West Highlandy, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. I really want to replicate it as best I can while still being able to run two trains at once and enjoy that process, because I do like the busyness of having two trains running. So with this being my sort of main line, or the intention of a main line, and running sort of DMUs and more modern ScotRail services on the inside reverse loops, the outer line has to sort of have these extra tunnels just to make it all work and come together. Regardless, I think there's a fair few tunnels in the Highlands, so I thought it was okay. I'm really trying to do this right, and I'm really trying to do the West Highlands justice. So I hope that makes a lot of sense, and I hope you understand now why I've had to include them, because there's literally no other way around it. Next, let's talk about the mountains, because there are a couple people asking, how do I access my trains if they derail inside either the reverse loop or the mountain itself? So I'm going to take you under the mountain and we can take a look. Welcome under the hood of our northern mountain. This is the larger of the two mountains, but I figured I'd just show you guys exactly what's going on down here and how I'm able to then access my locomotives and trains if they derail inside the mountain. So this gives me full access to reach all points of the track that are covered by the mountain. So from this side out, we've got the tunnel of the main line. We have right on this board here, the reverse loop. So I can see the locomotives as they run past. It also, I've just recently realized, gives me a really cool camera angle for shooting trains as they come into the tunnel, which I think is going to look pretty awesome. And I'll probably show you guys that in a couple videos time. Regardless, I can easily access all of the locomotives and trains and make sure that I can clean track from inside this. And essentially it's mirrored on the other side, although there's a little bit less headroom. So while here I can probably sit on my haunches, on that side I have to be a little bit more careful with my head. But there is more than enough room. It's pretty damn solid, and I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. So I can still access all my stuff should it derail, which it shouldn't, because I've tested this enough. So in the past week or 2 weeks or so, I've been managing to sort of cover up all of the tunnel portals, seal them in using expanding foam, and then cover them up with plaster of Paris. So this one is nicely sealed in, that one is nicely sealed in. I've included a little bit of brickwork on the side there, but I won't really be able to completely finish this all off until the layout comes forward and I'm able to do the scenics on the other side before we really progress with that. But at this point, pretty happy with how this is looking. This is really solid. What I'm going to do with both mountains is put a layer of plaster, or rhinolite as we call it here, on top of most of the mountain plaster, which will really help seal and lock it in and make it a lot more rigid and still very, very lightweight. This will help prevent any future accidents whereby if I accidentally lean or lose my balance while I'm doing my scenic work and put my hand down, I won't exactly punch a hole in a mountain. So that should help quite a fair bit. Just to give you an indication, here's the other far southern mountains tunnel entrance that's also been sealed in. I'm yet to do some rock work over there, but the basic foundations of the tunnel portal and entrance are there. Essentially used expanding foam, and once it had all dried up, I took a cutting knife and just slowly worked back all the excess expanding foam to free up the tunnel portal and make it look a little bit more visually acceptable. Obviously, it's a long way from being done, but we will get there soon. Okay, so let's talk about rocks and rock faces and how the cutaway is going. Well, a fair amount of progress has been made on the rock face alone. These are the Woodland Scenics plaster molds. Using plaster of Paris, you just pour them into the molds and pop them out about 15 minutes later, and they're ready to go basically. Glued these on and then used a mix of plaster of Paris to kind of fill in the gaps between rocks, and it's been really important and a good learning experience for me with rocks to figure out how rocks sort of fit together in formation. So let's say you've got, a fault line, I don't know what the best term for it would be, but essentially a line in the rocks that would persist around a mountain, as it was formed thousands and thousands of years ago. But creating that, actually millions of years ago, creating those lines and making sure that they were consistent around, and then while I was adding the plaster of Paris to sort of fill in the large open gaps, was a really interesting and quite enjoyable experience. I quite like doing this sort of stuff because it really brings out quite a creative side as you do so. But I think it's looking fairly good, and as you can see, it's got a bit of a texture to it. Now, this is a spray paint that I'm using called Rust-Oleum, and it's a textured version of Rust-Oleum, and essentially comes out the can in a very sort of plasticky, wet substance, even though it's an aerosol. And it looks terrible when it comes out and lands on the rocks, but once it dries, boy, do you get something rather special, a real unique texture to the rocks, which I'm quite enjoying. Now, I'm still at a stage where I'm sort of fiddling with this in terms of colors. I'm essentially working from light and working my way up to a dark color. So these rocks still need a lot of different colors of red and yellow to kind of give them a little bit more of a unique identity as I build up the colors one by one, but I'll probably be doing a separate video on the rocks alone at some point. Regardless, I think the current state of this is pretty damn good. I'm really happy with how it's looking. So do let me know in the comments what you think about that. But for the first half of the cutaway, I'm happy. Now, what's cool about this is that this line of rocks continues all the way around the northern mountain, this side of it here. So if you remember from my previous video, the plan is to have this as a cutaway essentially. So the railway line will have a cutaway through the mountain, and essentially this side of the mountain will continue downwards here. So we should have some really interesting shots for photographers who might post up here on the top of the rocks as the usual freight comes through, or sometimes a heritage special. So I think it'll be a really interesting and unique angle. But I'm going to finish this side of the rocks first before I start working on this side. And my plan for this side is actually to build it all up on a piece of styrofoam board first, so that I can just plop it down essentially in maybe 2 halves, and it should fit together quite nicely. Up at the top of the southern mountain where our sort of natural cutaway is, you can see that I've obviously ballasted all of this already. But the other thing to note is the sort of small track on the side of the railway line. And the intention here is that this will be a small sort of, I suppose, footpath alongside the railway line in the middle of these woods, which I intend to have here. This can be for a service purpose or just as a couple of hikers who are making their way alongside the line towards the distillery to enjoy a dram and the afternoon sunset. But it is obviously very, very light looking. That's not the final sort of look we'll have. I will airbrush that into a much darker sort of natural rock and stone looking color. I think one of the things I've slowly sort of learned over time, especially during the ballasting phase, is that you cannot test enough. You really do need to run your locos after your ballast has dried up nicely and you've cleaned it up a little bit. Run locos, run rolling stock as much as you can. I often find myself just putting on YouTube. I've got Charlie at Chadwick or something else on in the background, and I just let locos run for hours at times, just to make sure that there's no imperfections in the track from the ballasting process, in order to make sure that everything runs super smoothly like butter. So if that's one major piece of advice I could give to anyone doing something like this, it's just run trains. Just hammer, hammer, hammer your tracks. Don't think that it's going to be okay just because it looks okay. Make sure you run them to death. I hope you guys enjoyed my birthday ballast spectacular, and gosh, what a treat that Queen Anne is from Bill. Again, thank you so much. I'm so deeply grateful. It's really a perfect fit for me. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart, Bill. That means a boatload that you would decide to send something like that to me, all the way down here in South Africa. On the mention of Bill, I'd like to thank my other channel members, and they are Annie, Mystic Brick, Simon Thompson, Bill, 3B Rail, Jersey Bill, we have another Bill, he's from across the pond, Tony from Choberton Junction, Derek L, James from the Little Western Railway, Dan from Pedantic Mongrels Railway Channel, Rob from the Kiln Line, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but Joachim Bengston, another name I unfortunately cannot pronounce because I don't think I can read these characters, and Clagfest, our 3 newest members. Welcome guys, I really do appreciate the additional support. Means a hell of a lot to me, and thank you for joining the Westie Club. On a lighter note, a couple of you have asked me what whiskies I enjoy, and you may have noticed if you've tuned into the shunting yard, I always do seem to have a tipple of whiskey with me during the stream, which can get rather entertaining because I tend to get a little bit sauced. Regardless, I really enjoy my Speyside whiskies, Glenlivet being a firm favorite of mine, stuff like Loch Lomond. I prefer my single malts, and I also enjoy my really peaty stuff from Isla. So Lefroy, Artbeg, Kalila, and my absolute favorite, thanks to my late dad, Lagavulin. And no, this video is not sponsored by Lagavulin, although if you are listening, Lagavulin, I certainly would be very interested in a whiskey sponsorship. That is all I have for you this week, guys. I really do appreciate you watching. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. And until I see you next time, keep your engines fired and stay on track. All the best.